Hello, I'm Monsignor Jim Lisante. Today on Personally Speaking, I'll be joined by Academy Award-nominated actor Don Murray. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and actor Don Murray joins me now. Don debuted as Marilyn Monroe's leading man in the film Bus Stop, which earned him an Academy Award nomination. Don's other film credits include A Hat Full of Rain, Advise and Consent, From Hell to Texas, and The Hoodlum Priest. Don grew up on Long Island in a family that had show business roots. His mother was a Ziegfeld girl, his father a dance director. Don made his Broadway debut in Tennessee Williams' The Rose Tattoo, but his career was put on hold when he was called to report for duty during the Korean War. Don was strongly opposed to the war and was arrested after listing himself as a conscientious objector. He ended up volunteering to work with displaced refugees in Germany and Italy. In 1956, Don married actress Hope Lang, and together they had two children, Christopher and Patricia. Don has been married to his wife Betty since 1962, and they have three children, Colleen, Sean, and Michael. In 1961, Don co-wrote and starred in The Hoodlum Priest, based on the life of Father Charles Clark, who was a minister to street gangs. The movie deals with the issue of capital punishment. Joining me now to talk about his life, his career, his faith, his values, the values that have sustained him through a long and wonderful career, I'm very pleased to welcome back to Personally Speaking our old friend, Don Murray. We are here with Don Murray. I'm delighted to have him on as our guest. Don, when you and I first connected, you were a man in his 60s, and you're now a man in his 90s. Tell me what it's like to be in your 90s.
Well, I'm very grateful to be in my 90s and on this side of the turf.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling well. I'm doing well. I as fast as I used to, but everything else is working pretty good.
Now, Don, I remember years ago having dinner with you and Betty, and you have a lot of years of marriage under your belt. Can you give me some sense of what you guys did right to have such a long and wonderful marriage?
Well, the big thing, it helps that we not only love each other, but we like each other. And I think that's the main thing, and also to be considerate of the other person's feelings and be a good partner. So I think that's what
and you've been that together. For each other.
Yes.
Let me ask you, Don. One of the reasons you and I came together was you came to speak on the East Coast about the death penalty. Now, many years later, states one after another are getting rid of the death penalty. Do you feel finally that people realize it's not the solution?
Yes, I think so. I think it's throughout the human community, the attitude has changed about it, and for the better, I think.
When you made the Hoodlum Priest back in, I guess, 1961, to have a picture
shot in 1960 and released in 61, yes.
Okay, to have a picture like that actually showed us what happens in an execution, that must have been groundbreaking, no?
It was. It's the first time that they've ever allowed a film to be shot in an actual gas chamber. And it has a very emotional, very strong impact, I think, on the audience.
Don Murray's film, which he not only starred in, but produced, called The Hoodlum Priest, was the story of Father Charles Dismas Clark. Don, can you tell us something about how did you find out about this priest and who was he?
Well, Father Clark, also the Hoodlum Priest, was from St. Louis, Missouri, and I went to a screening of the film that I had shot in Ireland called Shake Hands with the Devil with James Cagney. And all of a sudden this priest came in and sat down next to me and said, "Hey, listen, Don, I ain't no square priest, see?" And he started to talk, and he sounded like a hoodlum talking. And he started to tell me the story of his life. And I said, "Wait, Father, I haven't seen this movie. Can we watch this movie now? And can you come to a hotel room tomorrow? And I'd like to hear your story." And then he did. We watched the film. And the next day he came to the hotel and he told me the story of his life, which was fascinating, including trouble that he had, that he worked so closely with criminals, getting them away from crime, that he was suspected of being a criminal himself. And they put on an informal trial, which he vindicated himself with a very passionate speech about capital punishment.
Don Murray is our guest. Don, we have in our church on Long Island a home similar to the homes established by Father Clark, Dismas House.
Yes.
But in our case, a couple of years ago, the deacon who ran it was actually killed by one of the residents.
Oh, gosh.
Going back to Father Clark, was he in danger by virtue of working with criminals?
Oh, there's no doubt that it was. And what you pointed out, exactly why. Because he's very, very compassionate toward the criminals, but they still do have criminal records and are not always have good control of their emotions. So he was always in danger.
He was always in danger. Don Murray also made a great film called Advise and Consent. And Don, looking at it now, when the idea of a senator possibly being closeted homosexual was very, very, very controversial, and now we're living in a culture with gay marriage and a lot of gay rights, are you surprised by the advances made by the gay community in the 50 years since that film came out?
Yes, I think that there's been much broader acceptance of the gay individuals, and I think that the film would be looked at differently today. It would not be such a phenomenon as it was at that time, because I got so many interviews where the interviewers said, "Oh, aren't you afraid what it would do to your career, that people would think that you're gay because you did this film?" And I said, "Well, that's something that I'd have to risk, because the film is such a positive film and such a good educational film."
Yeah, it's amazing. I would think back then it was a risky thing for a young actor to play gay in a big major movie like that, and you're saying it was. Don Murray is our guest. Don, let's take a few steps back. You are the son of Dennis and Ethel. Can you tell me something that they did right in raising you?
I think the main thing they did is they let me follow my own course, and they were helpful to me, but didn't do anything overtly to push my career. They let me handle that. They paid for my schooling, American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and I must say that and when I went to casting offices, if I were talking to anybody that knew my father as a stage manager, they were very open. So that helped me, not in them going out and overtly trying to get me work, but people respecting my father. I was always started with a feeling of respect from them, because I respected my father so much.
Okay, that's great. And did you get only encouragement from them for going into acting?
Yes, they
encouraged it.
they said, it's a very difficult profession, like being
Mm-hmm.
a musician and being singers like they both were. They were both professional singers. But we feel that you've got the talent for it, and since you have the passion for it, I'm sure you'll have success. And that's what happened.
Don Murray is our guest. Don, a lot of what you did in your life was informed by your faith. So I'm just wondering, how was faith taught to you, and how did you come to embrace it so warmly?
Well, I think that I had the example of some very people who are influential in my life, like there's a director, stage and film director named Peyton Price, who was a conscientious objector in World War II and went to prison for his beliefs. And as a matter of fact, he went on a hunger strike in prison and almost died. A hunger strike for to end the segregation in prison, and he was very influential in my life. And then also, when I went into Brethren service, this was a forerunner of the Peace Corps. That
Mm-hmm.
really was the basis of my work. Ever since then, I became interested in the social problems of the world, and I tried to let that be reflected in my work as much as possible.
Don Murray did something amazing and courageous back in the 1950s, and that he chose to be a conscientious objector when it came to the draft. Don, how did you come to that decision, and did you get much pushback from people around you not to do it?
Living in the theater, I was on the Broadway stage at that time. You get a people that tend to be more aware and more supportive in that position.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't have much trouble there, except that I was at first arrested. I began with considerable trouble because I refused to be inducted, and they arrested me, and I was in jail, and my mother made an impassioned speech that convinced them, the draft board, that I'd be more valuable to society by doing something like the Peace Corps than I would be just sitting in the jail cell. So I think it was my mother's very intelligent and impassioned speech that kept me out of prison.
Thank God for Ethel.
You said it.
And the work of what was then the precursor of the Peace Corps was in Europe for you. So what was the actual work? What did you do over there?
Well, first I worked in Germany for a year, working, helping to build the headquarter building of their work in Europe, of Brethren Services work in Europe. And then I went to Italy, and I worked for a year and a half in Italy. And then when my service period was over, I partnered with a social visionary named Belden Paulson. We went out and we bought some land in the island of Sardinia, and we started a refugee-free community, and took these refugees who were being held almost as prisoners in barbed wire camps, and built an open and free community that was very, very successful in a town called Simoxis in Sardinia. And as a matter of fact, I had a wonderful occasion to go with my 4 sons over to there and see the project, because it's still flourishing over there in Sardinia today after all these years.
You know, our Pope Francis has been very vocal about the Christian obligation to rescue and to save the refugees around the world, that we have more refugees now than at any time since World War II. Do you think he's on the right track?
Yes, I think he is. Yeah, I think that there's always going to be uh, refugees because there are always going to be wars, unfortunately. And when they can do something constructive like the Peace Corps instead of going to jail, like my friend Peyton Price, who went to jail for 2.5 years, it's much better for everyone, for mankind and for the individuals involved.
Don, you mentioned a moment ago going there with your sons. For our listeners, could you tell us, I think, am I right that you have 5 children? And tell me what's become of them.
Yes, I have. And one was Michael, is my youngest child. And Michael will help set this up here today and works with me throughout throughout my career and been enormously helpful to me. I'm Michael involved, and then to a lesser extent, I have Sean and Colleen and Christopher and Patricia. They're all interested in this kind of social outreach work.
Good. And how many of them followed you in acting?
Well, Michael is an actor, very successful actor. He was on a wonderful television series called Cop Rock, which he played one of the leads in that. And he works, does a lot of voiceover work, and also has done some wonderful acting parts. And so, but yeah, and also one of the most important things that he did is a treasure hunter. He dove for treasure on the largest treasure ship ever sunk in the Spanish Main, the Capitana, off the coast of Ecuador. And
Don, I want to go back to another film of yours with a Christian point of view. How did you come to be involved with The Cross and the Switchblade, which you directed?
Yes, I co-wrote that with a writer named James Bonnet and directed it. And it was something that the producer was anxious to get someone else to direct the film that he instead of doing it himself. So his name was Dick Ross, and he hired me to do the job, and I was very grateful for that because it was a great experience for me, not only a great artistic experience, but a great spiritual experience as well.
Don Murray made this film, The Cross and the Switchblade. One of his stars in that film was Pat Boone. I saw him interviewed recently. He's either 85 or 86 years old. Do you ever have occasion to stay in touch with Pat Boone, Don?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, we played on the same basketball team for a while, and we were.
Did you?
Yeah, we were twice city champions in the Industrial League. So I've had a lot to do with Pat ever since then, thankfully, because he's a wonderful man.
He really is, and I'm pretty sure he feels the same way about you. Listen, Don, this is a broad question, but when you've lived 90-some-odd years, you've seen lots of ups and downs in the world, but there's a sense in which things seem to be a little out of control in our country and around the world now more than ever. When you look at the mess of the world, are you hopeful? Do you see possibilities for making things better?
I am hopeful because there are people like Father Clark and like Mr. Wilkerson, who was the preacher in The Cross and the Switchblade. There are people like this in the world, and I think that there are more passionate people wanting to push the world forward, and more than the not passionate people or who are dragging it back. So as long as there are, I have hope for the world. I think we'll have a better world as the years go on.
Don Murray's our guest. Don, you and I have lived through the 1960s, so we saw great racial tension and riots and all the rest. And now here we are, 2020, and we're still faced with racial divide. Why are you hopeful that we'll ever get past this ridiculous prejudice that keeps us as two separate societies? Where do you get the hope from?
Well, I get the hope from the people as you see them on the streets now with the signs and talking about Black Lives Matter. These are the people that are bringing the world forward. And I think that we'll have more victories than we'll have losses in this kind of movements that we have with Black Lives Matter.
That's a good reason to hope. Now, for our listeners who may not know, Don Murray is based in California in the beautiful area around Santa Barbara. Don, every time we and the rest of the country hear about you, it's usually in light of natural disasters and fires and all the rest. Are you in a safe place?
Well, you can't really say that because the last big fire here started behind our house in the foothills here, and it proceeded toward our house, and but then it hit a broad field where the cattle had eaten the grass down so much there was nothing to burn, and on the other side it hit the lemon orchard. And it was very interesting that it would not burn the lemon trees because there's too much moisture in the lemon trees. So we were saved by that. We were saved by the cattle and by the fact that it was lemon trees. If it had been an avocado orchard, our house would have been lost in the fire.
That's pretty frightening stuff, Don. You're not frightened, are you?
No. One thing is that I have my son Michael here, who is tremendously helpful in that. He keeps the foliage around the house down so it won't burn. He's always here looking after us in the fire situation.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. He sounds like a wonderful son.
He is.
He is. Good. Yeah. I'm glad. I'm going to wrap this up soon, Don, but here's a question related to faith. We had Ed Asner, the wonderful actor, on. He's in his early 90s, and it lists him in Wikipedia. He calls himself a Jewish atheist. So I asked him on the show, as you're in your 90s, are you still an atheist? And he said, as I get closer to the end, I'm hoping you people are right.
Well, I'm sure you're
right. Well, that's my question. Do you think about the life to come, Don?
Actually, no. I very seldom think about it because I think I don't know where heaven ends, but I know where it begins. It begins right here on earth when you have when you're living with loving, constructive people. I think it begins right here on earth, and if there's a continuation of this afterwards, so be it. But that's gravy on the mashed potatoes for me.
I love that. That's a great perspective, Don. I want to thank Don Murray for being with us, a great actor, a great person, a great Christian gentleman. I've had the privilege of knowing him over the past 30 years, and he is ageless and wonderful and kind and good. And you are kind of the quintessential nice guy, but it comes from a deeper root of making the world a better place by virtue of just living as a Christian is supposed to, as a source of kindness and goodness, and you do that, and I thank you so much for that, and thank you for being with us on this show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me.
I'd like to thank Don Murray for being with us. I've had the privilege of being friends with Don for many years. It began by having him on a TV show that I hosted probably 25 to 30 years ago. I was intrigued by him ever since I saw the film The Hoodlum Priest, because he not only starred in it, but he was very instrumental in seeing that it got made. a very controversial film for the time it was made, especially the early 1960s, to have a film that was compassionate about ex-cons, to talk about mercy towards someone who was actually a convicted killer, to bring up the whole issue of where do we stand on the death penalty. And it was a film that was unusual in that it actually showed the electrocution of the star of the film, Keir Dullea, and the reaction of Don as the priest who promises him that even though we make terrible mistakes in our life, the mercy of God is vast. That was a message that Don Murray brought to the world back in 1961. It's interesting, but the story that the priest that he plays tells is one that we as Christian people need to hear again and again. He says to the killer who's about to face execution, he says, Jesus was hung on a cross between two criminals, and one of them, Dismas, asked Jesus, please remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus turns to Dismas and says, this day you will be with me in paradise. And the priest says to the man who's about to be executed, the only person we are absolutely certain that Jesus promises is in heaven is this man who died on the cross next to him. And it was Jesus' way, obviously, of saying that the mercy of God is vast, that regardless of the mistakes we may make in our life, that God's goodness and understanding and forgiveness is overwhelming, unconditional. That was a message Don Murray brought to the world in 1961, a reflection of his Christian faith and his desire to use the arts as a way to challenge the conscience. Again, thanks to Don Murray for being our guest. Thanks to you for listening to him. And I hope that many other people, especially in the Hollywood community, will take a lesson from Don Murray, that we're not just here to be successful, we're here to be faithful to our values and to put those values into action by leaving the world a better place because we lived in the world. And I think Don Murray, when he faces his God, will find a God who says, hey, Don, well done, good and faithful servant. Now come and enter the kingdom which has been prepared for you since the foundation of the world. Thank you, Don Murray. As we end today's program, I want to thank all of you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. All one word, closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, please go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz, and thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.